in collaboration with the Cyprus Mail. This is the Cyprus News Digest with Rosie Charalambous.
Coming up on this week's programme, we look into the failure of Cypriot authorities to curtail large-scale illegal bird trapping.
But the big organised trappers, and this is what we are talking about today, well-known trapping sites that for many years this has been going on, it seems that the authorities are unable or ineffective in stopping the continuation.
Cyprus continues to score very low on gender equality.
We can expect full gender equality, which is 100% from 55. I mean, it would take another 30 to 40 years. So obviously we're concerned, and I think that the score is indicative of how we need to move more concretely forward and take more substantial action.
And a new book looks at creating conscious business.
Companies are more than a balance sheet. Companies are all about their people, and we know this very clearly now. And we have to be very clear and focused on ensuring that our people are healthy and that their well-being is being looked after.
BirdLife Cyprus recently issued a press release, the title of which was "The Bird Trappers Who Slip Through the Hands of the Authorities." Now, in a place the size of Cyprus, you would think it was relatively easy, if the will was there, to make sure that the illegal bird trapping was seriously curtailed. But recent events and a shocking video raise serious doubts about the ability of the authorities in Cyprus to tackle organised and large-scale bird trapping. It is a business. If you haven't heard us on this subject before on the programme, it's a very dirty business. And for that reason, the spokesman from BirdLife Cyprus will not be named on this week's programme because threats have been issued, indeed attacks have occurred on anybody trying to put a stop to this illegal activity. So we will just say welcome to the programme to the spokesman from BirdLife Cyprus, and will you outline for us what exactly the problem is?
Thank you for inviting me, Rosie. The big problem here is that for some well-known trapping sites, and this is one of them and probably the largest in the Republic of Cyprus, it seems like there is no effective enforcement on a zero tolerance for illegal bird trapping. In fact, these sites have been, as we've seen also in the video that was issued by other NGOs, the RSPB, the BirdLife partner in the UK, we're talking about large-scale trapping of an organized group of people on a repetitive manner, and even though it's been reported multiple times by all the environmental NGOs that are active, including BirdLife Cyprus, it seems like the authorities have not been able to crack it down and stop this large-scale killing.
You say they've not been able to, but they have been quite successful in other areas. So what's so special about this area? First of all, whereabouts is it?
From the video that is being published, it's near Maroni in the Larnaca district. In fact, we have seen a big progress in the decreasing of illegal bird trapping levels in the recent years.
Particularly in the British bases, because they've taken a much more serious view of this, haven't they?
Exactly. It's been a turnover. They've issued a number of measures, use of drones, use of cover surveillance, extra personnel, training of the police officers, and a number of other measures like, for example, car confiscation. If a trapper is using a car, they confiscate the car as part of the prosecution. All these measures have made it a lot more difficult for trappers within the SBA, the Delia jurisdiction, to continue trapping, and it has increased the risk of a trapper that needs to take if he wants to continue.
So why isn't it working in areas of the Republic where it's government authorities who are responsible for the policing? It's not just the police, it's also the Game and Forest Department, I think, and they too have in the past been quite proactive. Are they not being in this particular area, or generally across the island?
I would say across the island we've seen also a decrease or a stable levels in illegal bird trapping within the Republic. But the big organized trappers, and this is what we are talking about today, well-known trapping sites that for many years this has been going on, it seems that the authorities are unable or ineffective in stopping the continuation. Why this is happening? This is definitely an ask to be put to the law enforcement agencies. All we've been doing here is stating the facts that we have reported these well-known trapping sites 10 times in the autumn season between BirdLife Cyprus, RSPB, the CAPs. Every time we visit the site to record the trapping activity, is full-on trapping, organized group of trappers. Every time the authorities go, they find nothing or very limited trapping.
Well, that would suggest, wouldn't it, that somebody's being tipped off somewhere. How easy is it for the relevant authorities to, if you like, scour their personnel and find out who is actively involved? It's got to be somebody, hasn't it? If this is, in a sense, an underworld organisation, then obviously they've infiltrated, it seems.
I wouldn't be able to comment on that, but this is a genuine question that we would like to also ask the Cyprus police, and we have asked for a meeting to present this information to them and somehow find a way to tackle with this particular case.
Is there any idea as to who is actually involved in the bird trapping?
From the video, one could say many of those faces are recognizable. Of course, the one that has been published, they are blurred, but the video that RSPB could provide to the Cypriot authorities, you would be able to recognize faces.
And have the Cypriot authorities asked for it?
We have asked for a meeting. We're still waiting for that meeting, even though it's been almost 3 weeks that we've been requested for a meeting to present this information that other organizations have captured footage of.
So where do you go from here?
From here, we're hoping that the Cyprus police that we have asked a meeting will be able to see us, hopefully, and we will be able to take some measures. They will be able to take some measures because it's in their authority to crack this down and hopefully put an end also to big organized crime network trapping groups.
Now, the other thing, of course, that we haven't mentioned this time we've spoken about this, and that is the end users, the restaurants. If this is such a large-scale trapping organisation, they have to have a market, and it's a very lucrative market for their illegal birds, the amberobulia. We know, do we not, which restaurants buy these and sell them as pretending it's something else. And we also know a lot of the important people in Cyprus who go and eat at these restaurants. So why not tackle it from that end as well?
I totally agree with you. We are always pushing the Cyprus police and the Game and Fauna Service also to tackle the demand and the consumption side. And it is something that also the Commission has repeatedly requested and asked as part of the enforcement to tackle the consumption. We as BirdLife Cyprus were doing whatever we can through awareness to change public attitudes. Every stakeholder needs to do their bit in a coordinated fashion to tackle this from all angles. And the other thing is, because generally illegal bird trapping has decreased, the fact that these big trappers still remain makes it even more lucrative for them. Because as you've mentioned, the demand is still there.
So it seems that there is relative success when it comes to individual small bird trappers, but the big business ones are still ongoing, and we have to ask, what are the authorities doing about it?
Keep up to date with events in Cyprus and around the world with the Cyprus News Digest.
The European Institute of Gender Equality, or EIGE, has just issued its index for 2019. And it hasn't gone down very well with the Mediterranean Institute of Gender Studies based here in Cyprus. Their director is Susanna Pavlou. Susanna, not surprising really that you're rather disappointed about how the island came out of this.
Well, we're not particularly disappointed. I think more accurately we could say that we're not particularly surprised. The European Institute for Gender Equality was here only a couple of weeks ago, and they were presenting the Gender Equality Index of 2017 because they publish the index every 2 years. They've just announced that they'll be publishing it every year, so we will have more updated data on where we stand in terms of then gender equality moving forward. So the data we have now refers to the most recent data on looking at different indicators, things like knowledge, power, gender-based violence, time. So they look at different spheres of people's lives, women and men, and look at how far countries have come in terms of gender equality. One area that they do look at they call it power, and it refers to basically women and men in decision making. And I should say overall, we've had a very slight sort of increase in our general score, which is about 55, if I'm not mistaken, which is a 1.2% increase from 2017, which is very, very small. I mean, we can expect full gender equality, which is 100% from 55. I mean, it would take another 30 to 40 years. So obviously we're concerned, and I think that the score is indicative of how we need to move more concretely forward and take more substantial action towards closing the gender gap in all these different spheres. The one sphere which I mentioned earlier on decision making is our lowest score, although it has the highest increase, if you like, since 2017. But it is still the lowest score, and it looks at this area of power, looks at social power, political power, and economic power. And what we wanted to point out in our statement was that we shouldn't be celebrating this increase because it refers to spheres of influence that
are traditionally associated with women, let's be honest.
Exactly.
So we're talking about maybe NGOs, and we're not talking about big business or politics.
Or politics is where real power, if you like. It's not to downplay the importance of the social sphere, but it just shows that the segregation that we see in employment, for example, with women concentrated in some sectors and men concentrated in other sectors.
And we should add, should we not, still with a huge gender pay gap here for those few women who are, in a sense, on a par with male colleagues in some of the higher paid jobs particularly.
Exactly.
But even in the bakeries
which is about 14%, yes. So I would be mindful, and this is what we wanted to point out, that we should be mindful of this seeming increase in power, because it does refer to, again, a traditionally female-dominated area, and not those spheres of influence where men will essentially give space to women, which is the economic sphere and the political sphere. So I think it's indicative again, and we've been saying this for years, and I'm sure, Rosie, that you're familiar with our demands, is that, we need more concrete action in closing the gender gap everywhere. And another area which I think is interrelated is the area of time, which we also have a relatively low score, and time refers to how much personal time women have, how much time they have for themselves to pursue other interests other than work and family. From the index, we can see that men do have more time, which I think
But that's partly, is it not, because particularly in the southern Mediterranean region in which we are, women traditionally are the family carers.
Absolutely.
And although, yes, you do meet people whose husbands do their share, they're rather the exception than the rule here, aren't they?
Yeah, I think that still is the case. So even though we've seen women, very dynamically in the workforce, and most women we know, as you say, work and are active either, professionally or in the volunteer sector, we still see that they do take the burden of family life and care work, unpaid care work, because that's essentially what it is. And I think that's indicative of two things. One is that there's still this division of labour in the household is still largely unequal, as you said, but also the lack of state services to allow both men and women to take part and participate equally, be it in the labour market, or in political decision-making and other spheres
We
of life.
do keep hearing the government saying that it's got various advisors, consultants and whatever on gender equality. Frankly, I haven't really seen that they've made any difference. I mean, are there any policies in place that you can tell us about that are trying to address this issue?
That's another issue that we refer to in our statement, is that we, over the years, have national action plans on gender equality that essentially are catalogues of activities. And what we don't see behind these national action plans, as they're called, is strategic thinking or strategic planning. Like, where concretely do we want to be in 2 years' time, in 3 years' time, in 5 years' time?
But that's what I mean.
What do we need to do to get there?
We're not setting targets, are we?
So we're not setting exactly.
We're just saying, we should do this and we must do that.
So
but we're not saying how we do it.
Exactly. It's too. There's many activities in our new national action plan. It has a duration of 5 years. What I don't see in that national action plan, which was very recently adopted by the government, is a strategy and concrete targets of where we want to get in these different areas. Where do we want to get in terms of women's participation in political decision making, very concretely, and then put those activities down. That would make it easier for us to evaluate the impact of these national action plans, because it's very good to have them and to have a budget tied, because from what I know, there are budget lines attached to those activities. But we want to see, come in 5 years' time, when we look back on what we've done, how do we evaluate it? How do we evaluate the change that this National Action Plan has brought about?
And how do we tweak it if it hasn't brought about enough change to satisfy the targets?
Well, exactly. So it's quite difficult to measure because we don't have those targets. And this lack of, we don't have those targets. And I would say, it's better to have a smaller national action plan, less activities, but more strategic thinking behind it, with very concrete targets.
Now, can you come up with any of those concrete targets and the strategic thinking?
Well, there's so many, but in political decision making, we don't need awareness raising campaigns. We don't need to inform the public why it's important to have more women and men in decision making. We've done that. We've done that for years. And I think people are more sensitized. I think people are more willing. So really we should be targeting political parties. We should be targeting government policy on care and looking at possible legislative changes. I mean, all these sort of actions that I'm mentioning, they need a little bit of research behind them to see what's possible and what's not possible. But that's why we need a strategic action plan.
But we also have best practice coming from other countries.
So quotas would be one. But it's not only that, because they're quite controversial. But we're very much in favour of quotas. I think that the index very much indicates how men are not willing to give up power in very sort of critical areas of influence, such as political decision-making and economic decision-making. So I think more drastic action is needed. But
what sort of more drastic action?
Legislative measures. In Cyprus, we're very reluctant to take measures that are not provided for in legislation. Yeah, if it's not foreseen, we're not willing to take that extra step. If it's not foreseen by law. So I think legislative measures that would put, for example, I'll give you one example that is not necessarily a quota. Political parties receive government funding, right? State funding. This last year it was increased. So I would put conditions on that funding. That's one example. And it's not just gender equality. What are they doing for climate change? What are they doing for ensuring equal participation of women and men? What are they doing on a number of other issues? And then tie those conditions to their funding, for example. So it's like a policy of more for more. You get more for more. One example.
That is basically down to the same thing in the economic sphere, which is, and in the civil service, of course, increasing productivity. And we haven't done that for years.
Precisely. Rosie, it all comes down to one thing. It's political will. It's political will. There are good practices out there. I gave one example. Other types of legislative measures, such as temporary quota system.
When you say a quota system, let's be clear, you're talking about...
I'm talking about the possibility of having 50-50 on the ballot, for example. Or, for example, in Italy, and I'm not necessarily saying that this would work in Cyprus. We have to look at it, though, but we have to look at it seriously. In Italy, for the European Parliament elections, voters have to vote for at least, I can't remember exactly, but they have to vote for an equal number of women and men when they're voting for the European Parliament elections. So, in that way, the political party is almost forced to increase the number of women on the ballot because voters are required to vote for both women and men. That's one other example. There's a wealth of good practice out there. It just requires strategic thinking, looking at what will work in our context, and political will.
Final quick question. This has come out. I presume the government is well aware of it. What have they said, or are you in touch with them and asking them what they plan to do about it?
No, we haven't heard. There has been no official reaction from the government over the index. We wanted to get the statement out because we didn't want it to be portrayed as any type of success, that we've raised our general score 1.2%. That's what we wanted to sort of preempt, that we have some sort of improvement, and really sort of break down the numbers a little bit in our statement to show that, in fact, if you look more closely at the data, it's not exactly brilliant. So exactly. So this is what we wanted to preempt, that we don't want to pat ourselves on the back and say, oh, there's been an increase of 1.2% overall. We've had an increase, very low score, but we've had a reasonable increase in the sphere of power. We don't want to be complacent. We want to say, no, this isn't good enough, and really put pressure as much as we can, which is within our power, for things to move forward.
And that is Susanna Pavlou, the director of the Mediterranean Institute for Gender Studies, MIGS, who was commenting about the recently issued index by the European Institute of Gender Equality. And yep, we have a long, long way to go in Cyprus.
This is the Cyprus News Digest with Rosie Charalambous.
Next Thursday, there's a book launch at the Solonian Book Centre in Nicosia. The book is entitled Life, Thoughts That Make the World Go Round, and the author is lawyer Artemis Evangelidis. She joins us now. Artemis, I don't think we usually think of lawyers as thinking about thoughts that make the world go round. So explain a little bit how you came to write this book.
Absolutely, thank you. Yes, of course we don't. And I always like to say that I'm a lawyer by trade, because 20-odd years of experience assisting clients in the corporate world and setting up businesses worldwide has shown me that companies are more than a balance sheet. Companies are all about their people, and we know this very clearly now. And we have to be very clear and focused on ensuring that our people are healthy and that their well-being is being looked after and that they are able to support the operations of the business. And it's something that I think is a main topic at the moment around the world, the well-being of our people and our staff.
Well, I think it's something that's become in the last, 5-10 years, very much part of the ethos of any forward-thinking company. But how does it work in Cyprus? Because a lot of us are used to the small family enterprises who don't really have the means sometimes to put that little bit extra into the welfare of their staff. Sure. Particularly if it costs.
Yeah. There's a lot of things that you can do actually for the welfare of your staff without it costing anything. And this is what we are working towards. And this is one of my biggest challenges, is trying to implement all of this in Cyprus and in Greece, in the region generally. I'm the only person doing conscious leadership work and conscious business work in the region. Effectively, it is about assisting people to raise their own consciousness, to be able to expand their own minds, and to step into this role regardless of their title or their position. It's about doing the inner work. It's about coming to terms with who we really are, what drives us, what our passions are, and assisting our teams to be able to achieve this themselves. So we start the work on a personal level, one-on-one. We do the internal work that we need to do to raise our own consciousness. And then as a team and as a culture, this ripples out.
It's very much as well, though you mentioned all the staff, but good management is surely the key to this. And again, my experience of many organisations in Cyprus, particularly those connected, I'm afraid, with the government, is that the whole structure is not designed to put the best motivational people into the management positions.
Yes, that's true, actually, and that's one of the biggest challenges that we're facing. But to be honest with you, every single time that we want to implement change, we have to start with ourselves. So we need to become the change that we want to see in our organisations, in our homes, in our communities, in our society at large.
How does a worker on the shop floor, as it were, start doing that when they can see that the managerial practices are actually counterproductive in terms of the well-being of the colleagues on the shop floor?
Yeah, this is actually something that I deal with on a practical basis when I go into companies to help them transform into conscious businesses. It's actually interesting because when people begin to change themselves, when they begin to react less and respond more, when they take responsibility themselves and show that they can solve problems or have the initiative to do the work that's been thrown at them, and sometimes it is very unreasonable, and obviously we're dealing with management structures that are very archaic, and we're trying to shift this paradigm, the people around them start to do the same because they start to like this approach. They see that it's different. They see that it's something new. And eventually, management has to listen. They take note. So sometimes we actually do the work from the bottom up. We're called in from management to do the transitional work and the transformation work. And we see that if we don't start with the actual people on the floor, as you said, then we can't actually reach the management, even though they've called us in and are paying us to do this work. And that's why the power that we all have as individuals to be able to do this transformational work ourselves is incredible. And that's the essence, really, of what's in the book.
What would you say if I asked you for just a couple of pointers, if you like, to somebody who's listening to this who thinks, we could do with that in our workplace? However big or small, I imagine that the methodology is pretty much the same.
Yes.
What are the things they should first look at and start with?
Firstly, we always start with procedures and processes. We want to make sure that everything that the business is doing is being done clearly so that the people actually know what they're working on and why. It's amazing how many times we go into companies and the staff have absolutely no idea what the mission or the vision or the goals or the why of the company is.
Sometimes that's never been set in stone anyway.
Yeah, sometimes management doesn't even know. And you can't really run a business in that way. You have to be very clear on what you're doing and why you're doing what you're doing so that everyone else can align with this purpose. But we need to get the groundwork done. It's like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We need to tick off the survival block first, so we make sure that everyone has the correct policies, procedures, manuals, contracts in place, and then we work through transforming on a one-on-one basis all the employees so that they're feeling very secure, very empowered in their roles. We do a lot of one-on-one coaching work, so to speak, and as we move through, then we work on the strategy and the vision of the company. We assist management to get that very, very streamlined as we train everyone in conscious leadership along the way. So it's a process that can take anywhere between 6 to 12 months, but depending on how committed the management is and how streamlined their processes are already, then we can sometimes do this in a much quicker way.
So the book launch is going ahead on Thursday. That's, as we said, the 31st of October at the Solonian Book Centre in Nicosia. And are you going to do readings from it? What form will the launch take?
We have 3 guest presenters who will each speak about the different elements of the book. So the book has been classified as self-help, motivational and business. And that's because You cannot possibly expect to change your business if you do not work on yourself first. Businesses are a mirror reflection of who we are. So we always have to start, as I said before, with the inner work. So the presenters will be looking at the personal development side of the book, the way that it's applicable to businesses, and how it can assist all of us to step into the role of the conscious leader.
So there you have it. If you'd like to find out more, go along to Solonian Bookshop next Thursday, 31st of October, starting at 6:30 for the book launch Life, Thoughts That Make the World Go Round. Well, that about wraps up this edition of the Cyprus News Digest. Many thanks for your company. Hope you'll join me next week. Till we meet again, take care and God bless. Bye-bye now.